the inequity, right? How do we surface the things that the system is privileging? So in these images, they were trying to get at that, right? They were trying to show, like, this system here is one. So this first one here with, I think they're apple trees. One, it's still valuing height, but the other thing it's valuing is that you even want an apple, right? So here's a way in which the system is privileging those things. Or this one here, right? The system is privileging your ability to ride a bike. So it's saying, you know, if you're really tall, you need a bigger bike, or maybe you need a wheelchair. But when we look at these images and then when we apply them to real life, it becomes really difficult for folks to understand how, like, some people need different things. Any other questions or?
Lauren, if you were to make this something real specific, like give us an example real specific of how it applies to our life right now, for example, like Wi-Fi access or something, how would you, if you were going to devise an image for us to see that applies to that, what would it look like in terms of equity, not equality?
Stanley, I've been asking that question for a while because I don't like any of the images. And I think that that's the problem with trying to explain through an image, that it doesn't really capture the nuance, right? The beautiful thing right now about what's happening with the pandemic, and there are so many negatives, right? But one of the beautiful things is that we are clearly seeing inequity. When you look at something like Wi-Fi access, and I think this is connected to Monica's question too. When you look at Wi-Fi access, it isn't prickly, right? Meaning we don't have our hearts connected to it where we feel like we're being shamed and blamed about stuff. We can simply look at it and say, not every student has Wi-Fi access. Not every student has a computer. But then when you start looking at things like race or gender, right? Those things are super complicated and messy and prickly, right? Where it becomes much harder to address that. And so in some ways, it's almost like looking at this Wi-Fi access is almost becoming like a little scaffold for us to now invite us to take a look at the harder stuff. Once I figure out the image, I'll let you know though. So I've got a couple suggestions, right, of next steps for equity. And I think I'm going to do this for equity, and then I'm going to go diversity and then inclusion. So one is we need a shared understanding of what we mean by equity. There's a lot of folks who come at equity with different things, right? They're thinking that equity is an outcome as opposed to the action we take. So just having a really shared understanding, like for KAD, this is what equity means. This is what we're going to be doing in our work. The other is getting really clear about what disproportionate impact exists for KAD students, right? Like I think about our student athletes, you're working with some of our most diverse student populations, right? So thinking about what is the disproportionate impact that exists for them, not just in math and English, but kind of across the board, right? And then the harder part is really thinking about what is our system valuing, and how are we taking equity measures to produce equality of outcomes? And I think that there are real shining examples, like for our student athletes, where they are finding a lot more success. So how do we also get really clear about, well, what is being done for them? And some of it is being in a cohort model, right? But there are things that can be surfaced both about the disproportionate impact and the equity measures. So let me pause there for a moment. Are there other questions or things that you're wondering? Because I know it's tough, right? I know when you're working directly with your students, it can be really difficult to start surfacing and making transparent where is their disproportionate impact, particularly for equity measures.
I don't really have a question, Lauren, but I just would like to just say that I think this is great that this is happening. And for years, the coaches have been bound by certain rules that wouldn't permit us to create this environment that we're talking about. And the fact that the school has started to provide these types of resources for all students And now it is available to our student athletes. So this is just great progress, and I'm just happy for our students of color and students that need these resources. That, you know, as coaches, we've identified these needs with our athletes for years, but
Yep.
we've been handcuffed. You know, we can't go buy a kid lunch, even though we do, but you know, or a kid doesn't have a
Yeah.
textbook. You know, it's just tough. But I'm just anyway. I just want to say thank you
No,
for
yeah.
what you're
And you
doing,
know,
and just fired up.
and I think and I think this is where we can also start thinking about partnering with committees like the ISSC that has C funding, right? That how do we start getting clear with them about the student populations that we're working with and how they are disproportionately impacted, right? And then how are we going to take these measures to help them find success? And you're right, there's, I think for a long time there was an expectation that students came from middle class sort of mainstream backgrounds, right? That we wouldn't need to provide things like lunch, right? Or books. And I think that we're still fighting a little bit to help folks understand that equity means we're not necessarily treating them fair, right? Not every student needs lunch, but some do, and we need to figure out who they are. So equity is also connected to diversity. And so the American Libraries Association, part of their EDI work is they went ahead and they created these shared definitions. So here's one of their definitions, right, for diversity. It can be defined as, whoops, getting excited here. It can be defined as the sum of the ways that people are both alike and different. When we recognize, value, and embrace diversity, we're recognizing, valuing, and embracing the uniqueness of each individual. So what I think is difficult in the United States is that sometimes we are not taught to notice and embrace difference, right? So Stuart Hall, he's the late cultural theorist and also sociologist. So he wrote and argued that difference simply exists, right? So people are different, things are different, difference exists. What matters is the meaning that we assign to the differences that we notice, right? So we're going to see difference. What we need to be really clear about is what meaning are we assigning it. So the part that's really complicated is in the United States and in any social organization, right, or any grouping of people, there are these social constructs. And I want to talk about race as one of those social constructs, but there are many social constructs, right, that are connected to gender, that are connected to ability. And what a social construct is, it's simply a human-made sort of whole definition and narrative around something. So race is a narrative that was created to confer power. It was created for economic purposes. And then what happened is there was all this pre-assigned meaning that was given to race. And then it was taught to people as if it were true. Right? So think about that, right? Race at one point, like some people created it. And then we are now inheriting assigned meaning, right? And so if we go back to Stuart Hall, difference exists. Some people are different shades. Some people come from different countries. What matters is the meaning we assign, right, to the differences that we notice. So race, like many constructs, is something that comes with pre-assigned meaning. And part of our task in doing this diversity work is getting really clear on when are the moments when we're noticing difference. Are we assigning meaning to those differences? And oftentimes those meanings, right, that we're given, they connect to a person's intelligence, right? They connect to a person's ability. I'm going to add sort of Zaretta Hammond, and she did this amazing book. If you're really curious about culturally responsive teaching and learning, Zaretta Hammond's book, Culturally Responsive Teaching and Learning and the Brain, is amazing, right? She's writing it for educators. So one of the things she talks about here is mental models. And she says, think of them as this whole tree of knowledge inside our brains, right? So we get schema, inert pieces of information taken and interpreted, categorized based on deep cultural norms, beliefs, and ways of being. And then she says another way of understanding schemas, it's this set of conceptual scripts that guide our comprehension of the world. So what happens is we're taught these things like race, we're taught these things to assign, right? Like we assign sex equals a certain gender, right? So we're assigned all of these conceptual scripts of the world that guide our comprehension. So part of the diversity work is, I think we have to hold what Stuart Hall is saying, right? Difference exists. What matters is the meaning we assign to the differences that we notice. So one of the really difficult things that happen, and I know brown bear, but stay with me. One of the hard things that happen is we learn from a really young age these conceptual scripts, right? So Brown Bear, you might have heard it, right? It's a children's book. Both of my daughters were born up in Washington State, and like many new parents, I went to a library reading time. And this one in particular was a sing-along, right? So all the parents, caregivers in the room were singing along. So if you don't know the song or the book, it's Brown Bear, what do you see, right? I see a red bird looking at me. And it goes on, the red bird sees a green frog, right? And then an interesting thing happens though when it gets to the person or the people, right? So all of the animals have color. And then so there was a moment of shame for me because I'm singing in the room, and I said, white woman, what do you see? And immediately, like the people right around me just glared at me, right? So it was super shaming. Like, oh my goodness, they were singing teacher, teacher, what do you see, right? And then I see children looking at me. And so I really sat with that moment for a long time because for one, I grew up in Hawaii. We talked about race. Like people ask what you were all the time. I'm Chinese, Filipino, Samoan. I'm also Dutch, English, Irish. We talk about it all the time. And then, so here was this moment where I thought, oh my goodness. So we're teaching children, one, that yes, it's okay to notice the differences that we see in the animal world. But then when you look at people, you're not supposed to notice that they have a race. And I want to say, I totally get where they're coming from, right? I mean, what they're trying to teach children is we don't want you to assign meaning because of race, right? We don't want you to grow up and say, oh, white people are this or Asian people are that. But what's happening is when we're simultaneously teaching children to notice difference, we're also teaching them to not ever say and remark upon the differences that they might notice in people. And I think that that's the really difficult part. When we're not taught to be able to talk about difference, then what happens is we'll simultaneously reifying those other scripts that we've learned, right? So while I'm learning to never talk about race, I'm still learning those conceptual scripts about race, right? And so that silencing and that inability to talk about race is the thing that keeps us from actually getting to a space where we can move forward, right? And heal. What are some thoughts about that? The questions you've got, things you're wondering?
I think, Lauren, in our society, at least the society I've grown up in, it's considered not polite.
Yeah.
It's considered not polite. It's disrespectful.
Yeah.
And so it's like feeling shame to say it.
Yep.
And that's interesting. That's just been my experience.
And Stanley, I get it because I went from the opposite experience, right? Where we just like I'm always asking, like I remember growing up in like elementary school, we always asked each other what, because we're all many of us were mixed. What are you? Right. And we talked about it. And I have to say that moment of being in the library, like it really, like I felt that shame. And I think, and it for me, it was an awesome moment of empathy too, right? Because I could understand Like, I remember a colleague telling me once that growing up, he was told to never talk about money, politics, and sex. Race, though, was so taboo that he didn't even need his parents to say to never talk about it, right? Because it was just so taboo. And I think part of the struggle I think that we're going through right now is because we have never talked about race, we have all this internalized shame around it and also feelings of blame and guilt. And so part of the issue is we just don't have um like we don't have like muscle memory around it, right? Like we don't have that, oh, okay, this is something I've done before, right? I know it's going to be hard, right? But I'm not going to be okay. They're not targeting me specifically. And it's something that I can work through. But I think these are difficult spaces for people. And I know we're almost, I think, I think maybe I'll go to my meeting just a little bit late. It's the ISSC meeting, so I want to make sure I'm not late to it. But I want to, I've given some possible diversity next steps, but I do want to talk a little bit about inclusion, because to me, inclusion is the space where we kind of bring all of it together, right? So inclusion means all individuals, right? Like we can get to a space where we finally are able to treat folks fairly and respectfully, right? Where their skills, experiences, and who they have equal access to resources and opportunity, and they can fully participate in the organization. So like one of the big questions I think for all of our departments and groups is to think about what is the community that we're inviting students into? Are they welcomed? Are they valued? And are each of them allowed to contribute to the success of the whole? And I think that that's an amazing but also difficult space for us to get to, right? Um, I was going to give you this whole thing on this poem that I read. Basically, John Donne argues, and you might have heard it, no man is an island entire of itself, right? And part of what he's arguing here is we're not separate entities, that we're all this one piece of the continent, right? So any small piece of the continent that gets washed away, it diminishes all of us. And he's right that we're not islands, but I think he's also wrong because I think people get a misconception of islands, right? So, because islands are actually connected underneath, right? So this is the Hawaiian archipelago. Is it okay that I go a little long? Or is that
Absolutely.
okay? So Hawaii is created on a hotspot, right? So the hotspot in the Pacific plate just keeps moving, right? As the magma keeps coming up. And what it's doing is it's creating all of these islands. And the magma and the hotspot doesn't stop, right, to honor the boundary of one island. They're all connected underneath. And I think people are like the islands, right, where we're separated on the top by water, but there are things below, right, that connect all of us. And I think sometimes what happens is we get fixated on the water to think that we're separate, and we don't recognize, and part of it is because of those conceptual scripts, right, that we've been taught, that if you are this, right, or if this is a difference that we can perceive in you, therefore, right, all these other things that happen. So we focus on the water and we forget that there are things in our community that bind us. There are values that bind us. And part of the work, I think, in creating like an inclusive community, one in which there's equity, one in which we're recognizing diversity, right? And recognizing the scripts that we might give, is to think about how do we move towards an ecosystem, right? And in an ecosystem, we understand that all parts contribute to the whole, right? So if you are like an ocean ecosystem, when the reef is decimated, it's not just the reef that's decimated, there's ripples throughout the ecosystem, right? Or if there are groups that are overfishing, then the animals that those fish used to eat and the animals that's supposed to eat those fishes, they get impacted too. So ripples out, right? And so we understand how there is this unique, amazing balance that exists between all parts, right? And how all parts contribute to the whole. And I think I'll end on this point, but there's also social ecosystems, right? So Ahupua'a is something that exists in Hawaii. And so if you think of an island, think of pie pieces, right? So the island was cut into slices of a pie. And your slice of a pie had access from mountain to ocean, right? And within that pie piece was everything you needed to survive. And within the pie and within your ahupua'a, everyone had a responsibility to the whole, right? And so what that means is some folks cultivated taro, some folks fished, right? Some folks collected medicinal herbs, right? For to create plants. I mean, and to create medicine. And so there was an understanding within the system that no one part was more important than the other, right? Because you could have as much fish as you wanted, but if we didn't have the medicinal herbs, right, or if we didn't also have taro, the whole community wouldn't thrive. There was also an understanding, though, that it also your pie piece or your ahupua'a was also connected to the other pieces, right? So if the other ahupua'as were overfishing, or if the other ahupua'as were collecting too many birds, that impacted our ahupua'a as well, right? So there was an understanding that we needed to live in symbiosis within the community, within nature, but also within the other communities as well, right? The other ahupua'a. And what I think is interesting about this too is there was a recognition that you also needed to prepare the future generations that were coming up. And so if you were an amazing like cultivator of taro, then you also needed to like be teaching the next generation that was going to come and cultivate taro. And you also still needed to support the people who are fishing and doing these other things. And I think sometimes what happens in like our college systems is they're so complicated and convoluted that we don't even understand anymore how our survival and how us being able to thrive depends on the others. And also how within our small group, we can be situated in ways that are supporting and sustaining each other. And I think when we think about equity, diversity, and inclusion, I think that's the ultimate goal, right? Is to think about how do we provide equity measures for our students? How do we get to a space where they are fully included, fully participating in all aspects, right? For the success and well-being of the whole. And how are we also paying attention to the differences that we notice, the meaning that we might be assigning them? And then I gave you some suggestions, tons of opportunities to do some reading also in the resources page. And I am clearly not a 30-minute kind of person. Sorry about that. And so how about, because I do need to go to my other meeting, but I would love if there are questions, things that we can be chatting about. And I have to say, I would also love to sometimes work with some of you, like with the Pacific Islander students who are coming in, because I think there's some knowledge that I could also sort of share in terms of like their expectation and worldview, but also just the larger work that you're also doing. Because again, like I said, I think you're working with some of our most diverse, amazing populations of students. And you know, if our student athletes could find some success, then I think that's going to ripple through, right? And you are finding success. So also, how do you share some of the great practices that you're also already doing? So thanks, and I'm sorry that I've got to go, but thanks for inviting me. And again, I'm really just thrilled and excited about the work that you're all taking on, because I think this is the work, right? When we come to community college, this is the work that we've taken on. So thank you all.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you so much, Lauren. I will take you up on that offer to come speak to my guys. We have a lot of new guys coming in from the
Awesome.
islands and other places. And then also, is it possible for you to email me the presentation you had today that I could send out with our meeting notes for some of the people that
Yeah,
couldn't attend?
you know, I'm gonna put it back in our chat, but there's
Perfect.
two
Save
links.
Lenny, and I can send it as links.
Okay,
Awesome.
cool. Thanks, you guys.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Have a
Thank you,
great
Lauren.
day.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Lauren.
All right, you guys, that was she's awesome. And if that's the first time you've had a chance to see her or listen to her, I hope you guys enjoyed it, because she was really just a great person, and is really involved in different places on campus. And so we're happy to have her, and I think that she'll be back, I hope. Um, okay, next on our agenda, or are there any comments or anything anybody has regarding um, Lauren, or that 30-minute session we just had? I thought there were just some awesome examples. I'm I am learning all the time, and every one of those illustrations that makes it easier for me to understand this stuff is really helpful. And they're so simple, and it's like you look at it and go, well, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, Dante.
One thing that I think is, everybody hear me okay? I got headphones on. I think one thing that's important to talk about, and that she discussed the uncomfortable side of this that so many people feel, that keeps them from maybe being engaged in the conversation and just be an outlier, right? Or on the periphery looking in, is this understanding of vocabulary, and that I think a lot of times the people that are uncomfortable about talking about that, I just look at my own situations, all the conversations I've had with people I know, and where hiccups or speed bumps come in the way, sometimes turning the walls, is their lack of understanding of how to discuss it, or the fear of being prosecuted or persecuted on the language that they use, right? If saying in reference to a certain community, if they use the wrong language, they'll be considered a racist individual, or they'll be considered insensitive to the situation. So I think as these conversations move forward, the use, Monica, we talked about in the EDI before we got the meetings, the language that's used is really making a comfortable space to say, hey, we understand that there's language that we don't all understand, or maybe we're saying things the wrong way, but the fact that the process of discussing it and working through it is available. And I do feel, I related to the conversations on kneeling with Kaepernick, right? And how so many people have skewed perspectives on what that meant, and how it related to the flag, and so whatever it may be. And I think so many people, when they came out in through lack of understanding, say something like, it's against the flag, and then they're outcasts, and instead of embrace, right, and say, hey, okay, we have a misunderstanding of what that means, or the language that is used, and I understand that you don't understand the pronouns, and understand the certain language that's used with a particular group. Let me explain it to you and help you understand that. I think that's one of the biggest hiccups in the struggle of discussing such an issue, is the comfortable feeling comes from me not wanting to, and I say me, but us not wanting to offend another population. So I'm just going to shut up and not say anything, a fear of stepping on someone's emotions and feelings. And I think that piece is one of the biggest stops of this whole conversation. And if we can continue to help people understand language, it makes conversations a whole lot better.
Go ahead, Dave, and then I have a follow-up comment on that. So Dave, unmute yourself so we can hear you, bud.
Yeah, how you guys doing? I mean, this is a huge situation, as we all know. But for me, it's diversity, connecting the dots. And I think, for me, you know, for we having different races, that we have to, for me, I think to have a resource to help that communication get contributed, just like, for example, in Santa Rosa. I mean, the Afro-American students, are we have maybe have a decent number playing sports or coming to the school. If they have resources to help them understand what is expected, but also from the college to understand their cultural upbringing, or say for me, our cultural upbringing, on things that we had to deal with coming up that may be normal to us as far as communication or even living things, how we had to grow up. And then we come and we get on a team, or we get into part of a group that, how your upbringing is don't fit. So how can we make that fit? How can I communicate this? You understand this is what expected of you, but also to get the university to say, we understand this. How can we understand you better so you can get along? So if you did something, or if you communicate, because for me, we almost built our own language to communicate with each other, for me to help another Afro-American student, or this can go for any coaches, but I have to speak on my community because it's easier, but it's just, we almost develop so we can understand each other. You have to go, we at the JC, you have to go to see an academic advisor. You have to go try to set yourself up to where you can get some housing. You have to go to coaches meeting, and to get them to understand these steps that they have to take to be successful, can get lost because it's nobody really directing that communication where they can understand it better. So it's diversity that I feel that have to be put in place, so they have that resource, the resource coming down to them, but also the resource that they can give to come up to the university to understand them better.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate that. And moving forward, for what Dante said, I agree with you, Dante. That is a factor for some people, but I think another factor that's probably equally as big, or maybe even bigger, is that there are people that just don't believe that they could be racist, or they don't care, and there's no possible way that I could understand what Dave McCall has gone through in his lifetime. I mean, I can listen, I can hear his stories, I can be empathetic, I can, all those things. But unless I walked in his shoes, man, I'm not going to truly understand that perspective. And unfortunately, that one of the big barriers we need to break down is get people to be honest with themselves, and understand that it is okay not to understand something, but to seek to understand it, is really the key, and do the best you can. So Dave, I appreciate your comments big time, man. Yeah, Monica.
Yeah, Dave, thank you. That's great, great perspective, and thank you for sharing. And also, to Dante's point, it's like Byron Reeves did a great presentation we talked about in the EDI committee in our meeting right before this. And one of the main issues our institution has, from the lens of our Black employees, and through their voice as well, our Black students, is that SRJ on the whole doesn't recognize that we have a problem. And I think people have an issue with, even right now, I'm like sweating a little bit because I'm going to say that, like, the institution as a whole, and then I'll always sugarcoat it. I'll be like, well, we're not as anti-racist as we could be. Instead of saying there are racist things that go on this campus. There are racist things that I have done as a human being, and that I still will continue to do until I do my work, right? So we're all on this spectrum. And I think that we all just have to get comfortable and be a family and come together and say, hey, that terminology, hey, let's not like push people out. Let's bring people in. As long as we can all agree we're doing this to be better people, to be better, teachers, to be better mentors for our student athletes and for our students, and to really provide a better experience for our students, then we have to be able to be comfortable with saying, there's some racist stuff going on, or that a racist thing, right? I grew up my whole life thinking that like a certain my internet's going to go unstable now, but Lenny, can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry if I freeze. Apparently this internet is awesome. But there's my Japanese family would say things about other cultures that I thought, and then my white family would say things about other cultures I didn't know were wrong, sometimes into my adult life. And so it's like what Hotep said in the training over the summer, like, just because everybody has teeth doesn't make you a dentist. Like just because I'm not completely white, mixed race is a whole different category of people, right? That get their own bag of chips going on. But, you know, like just because you're a person of color, just because you live that life doesn't necessarily mean that you're the most woke person in EDI work, right? I'm not. I make mistakes every single day. And I just want to share this really quick that, I mean, I said, call campus police on a black wrestler one time that was just a wrestler. I mean, he was just a wrestler, pissed off. We were trying to hold C-spine. You might have a C-spine fracture. He was just mad as an athlete, right? And our, used to be, not anymore, all right, students, call campus police for the ambulance. He ripped that thing off and ran out the door in 2 seconds. I'm in Ron Meyer's office the next day getting called a racist by that kid's dad. I was furious until 5 months ago, and that was 5 years ago or more. I did a culturally incompetent that some could categorize as racist. And I think we all just have to get comfortable, like, yeah, I messed up and I'm going to move forward and I'm probably going to mess up again. But I want to be able to, like, you know, call Al Scott and be like, hey, Al, I messed up. Or, you know, to call Crystal and be like, ooh, you know, how do I work on this? Or let's talk about this, right? So I just want to throw that out there. Like, I don't know if I'm talking too much, but I just think we all have these levels. And if we could just comfortable being like, dude, 5 years ago, I did a racist thing. That's not the problem, right? Like we have to recognize that, but then now what are we going to do? And I've already made it very clear to everybody, we're not saying that anymore. We're going to say we're calling the ambulance and my students will just know what number to call, right? So thanks for letting me speak.
Thanks, Monica. Tara?
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Monica. I really appreciated hearing that. I wanted to share the work when Lauren showed that book 20 years ago. I worked in preschool, you know, a special ed program, right? And my lens for what I was saying, my lens for equity and inclusion have always been through the lens of ability, right? That's my bailiwick. And so in the preschool program, I cannot tell you how many times I read Brown Bear, Brown Bear. You know, that was, but over the past few years with, you know, identifying my white privilege and trying to do the work to become a better anti-racist, right? And which helps kind of give that language that you can use, right? That I wouldn't have acknowledged before. So when she brought that book up, when she turned that page to where the first thing I saw was, which I had never seen before. I've read that book a million times, right? And I'm like, oh my God, it's a white woman. Isn't the same? That's why when Lauren said she sang white woman, I'm like, that's what I was thinking in my head is like white woman. I'm like, oh my God, that I didn't see that 20 years ago. And that I'm beginning to have that awareness now, I think is where we all need to go. So even in DRD, disability resources, where our focus is on equity and inclusion for ability, we are currently doing this work, right? Because we are acknowledging we have not looked at BIPOC and as through that lens, through that same lens. So we're still doing this work too. So I'm so happy that our district is really immersed in this. This is, and we have a long way to go, yes, but at least we're starting. So thank you.
Thanks, Tara. Is there any other comments, you guys, on that topic before? I mean, this is just, we could talk about, I wish we could talk about this all day and just listen to people sharing, because I think that's how you learn, you know, like sometimes it helps to be brave by seeing someone else be brave.
Lenny, Jill and Tara have their hands up if you can see that.
Jill, then Tara, then Monica, I believe.
I just wanted to say briefly that I've really been, I'm thankful that we teach and coach in a field where I think we have the privilege of understanding that different supports are required for different students, because you can't be working towards developing someone's potential in a performance-based field without recognizing that and supporting your students and your student athletes in different ways. And so I actually think it's a strength that we can build off of going forward. I think the key is not just seeing our student athletes, you know, equally, but taking, like Tara said, taking this lens now and seeing things through a different lens and through a broader lens. And perhaps it's not just like psychological and physical supports that we are working on with these student athletes, but we're having a larger awareness of where our whole student is coming from. And so that has been, I find some encouragement in that. I feel like that's a place we can build from, where we are comfortable to push ourselves into an area where we're not comfortable and kind of lean into it a little bit more. And then the other, I've been lucky enough the last few years to really dive into some of this stuff and critical race theory and, you know, unintended bias, and really start looking at things differently, like the story Monica shared. Like, you start looking back and thinking, you start recognizing the filter you are looking, and the lens you are looking at things through. And so that's been interesting. And so I just wanted to share a term that I learned a couple of weeks ago in a training similar to this. It's called intersectionality. And I'm really getting into this concept, trying to learn about it, but it's this concept of whenever you're dealing with a human being, you know, they are many different things. Like, I'm not just a woman, I'm a white woman. And I am simultaneously those two things at all times. And so, you know, it's different than seeing, you know, a woman that is a Latina woman, or a woman who is a Black woman. Like, those two things exist or those things, and there might be even more things than that, right? So like, I might be a white, married woman, and those things coexist for me at all times, and they don't separate, and I shouldn't be treated like, I think we're very, like, in some ways we fit a category over here, so people only see us through that category, but they don't see all this other stuff that makes up who we are. And so that's been an interesting concept and term and definition that I'm kind of pushing myself to, you know, look at people and look at my students and look at my student athletes and respect what is their intersectionality, who is that whole person. And so that's just another kind of lens to push me and really get to know that person and understand. And it is hard. You do need to lean into those questions, but I'm finding the more that I'm being honest and talking to people and asking questions, even though I'm afraid I'm going to offend somebody, it never comes off as offensive. It always comes off as a learning moment for me, or a teachable moment for me, or really pushing, you know, really starting to listen to understand, not just listen. So yeah, so those are some of the things that have been like, I'm like working through, and there's so much out there, you guys, there's so much out there you can read, but I think the more we hear from people like Lauren, just like face to face, I think it will help us understand and feel better and push us so we feel more confident we can get out of our comfort zones as well. So anyways.
Thanks, Jill. Tara?
Yeah, I think Monica made a good point about, you know, everyone being sort of at a different stage of awareness. And, you know, just coming from me for realization, you start to learn more about this work, and then you start to reflect back, and you have those feelings of like just sadness and guilt and shame. Like, you know, how did I miss this? Like, how was I not aware? You know, I could have done so much more, and wanting to learn more and wanting to like really, you know, push forward. But we have to remember, like, there's some of us that are like, yeah, let's go, let's run with this. And there's some people that are still in a stage of like, what are you talking about? Of course, I'm not racist. Or so everyone's kind of at a different level. And I feel like just, you know, making sure that we create a safe space, at least in our department, for people to step forward in incremental steps if that works for them, and feel like they're not going to be judged, or, you know, we're not, you know, forcing them too fast into a certain direction, but just, you know, keeping it really open that, you know, the whole point of this is to help students. And that's why we're in the position that we are. And we're realizing that we need to help some students in different ways, and we need to learn in from those students and from other sources how we can better do that, and what the things that we need to change about what we're doing right now. And just being supportive, I guess, in that process with each other, so that we can keep, because it's just so valuable that we can keep moving forward with it and we don't get stuck at any certain point.
Thanks, Tara. Monica?
Now, just quickly, because I know we have to move on, the idea about, just because we all have teeth doesn't make us dentists, and then, not all dentists are even the same, is like, just because we have a diverse population of student athletes more on some teams than another doesn't mean we're dentists, right? Doesn't mean we're experts how to handle and how to provide equitable experiences. That's why I'm so excited that we're all here. And at the same time, I feel like, some of us obviously overtalk, and some of us, don't feel comfortable with conversations like this. And so I hope we can create that safe environment where people can just feel like, the traditional, like, dumb question or question that's going to make them, really nervous to ask. I hope that we can create that environment where everybody feels like they could ask, and maybe it goes off of the recording when we have those conversations, because right now I don't know if I felt super, super ashamed or of my question or whatever, that I would say anything if it was recorded. So maybe we can create that environment where, some of us, talk less to allow others to talk more, but to make it safe for others to feel like they can say, I have no idea what you're talking about with that term or whatever, or, please explain the situation to me because this is how I've seen it for 20 years, right? So I just want to, because we're all in different spots, and that doesn't make us better or worse than other people. I think we all are a team, and just like a team, or just like your class, we have to go to all the different levels of ability and make sure that we have a good experience with this, because we don't, we're all going to be uncomfortable, but like, how could we do that to make people, everyone feel like they can talk in these talks that we have,
Thanks, Monica. Dave, you're muted, bud.
I'm gonna be real quick, but I just want to tell you experience I had when I went to college, and I'm saying this because of the communication factor. So I went to Utah State, came up, just out of, just say, the ghettos, right, of San Francisco. When I went to Utah State, everything was expected that I knew what I was doing when I went to college, but I didn't know anything, right? So when I went to college, I didn't even know about a counselor. I didn't even know to get classes. And so when I first got to, I had a scholarship, basketball scholarship. So the coaches just kind of threw me out there. So I just went and took classes. So I was taking all these upper division classes. I didn't even have a major. I was just taking all these different classes and whatnot. And so I was in these hard classes that I wasn't even supposed to be in. And I was studying with different people. And then my roommate, who was a junior, and I barely seen him study. So I went in his room one day. I said, why am I always studying, busting my butt? And you sitting here, you watching TV and you relax. He said, because you don't know what you're doing. And I said, well, tell me what I'm supposed to be doing. He said, first of all, you need to get a counselor. And then a counselor try to get you on the road of you finding a career or major you want to study in. So it took me a whole semester that I wasted because I just didn't know. So I'm saying this is because that's kind of the expectation. Sometimes we come in and think that a student or athlete or whoever they know, but it should be a system, an introduction to introduce them to just steps that they need to take to get on the road of trying to graduate and participate and be involved in things. So I was just kind of lost in that shuffle. I just wanted to share that real quick. Hey, thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it very much. And, one of the ways that I try to describe what we're talking about to the coaches on our staff, I steal a line from the original Rocky, but we're here to fill in gaps, and those gaps are the boxes. Some people don't have any gaps. Some people have big gaps. Some people have medium gaps, and it's our job at this level, and in life too, but especially at the level we're at, is our job is to identify those gaps and fill them in. And so it's a real simple way to look at it, but that's how we try to do it, and sometimes simple is easy for me. Matt, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to everybody. Good morning, by the way. This is a great conversation, and I think this is like my 26th or 27th year of athletics focused work between coaching and being an AD. The interesting thing, it's great to see because I've been, trying to work on getting academic support services for our student athletes since I've been here, and it's hard to dive into it because for 26 years, you talk about how great the athletes are and how they're doing transfer wise and how they're doing, how they're having success in the classroom with GPAs and taking it more units than anybody else. And it's all true. And it's true because the coaches create such a great support system within their staffs. And, the coaches have the carrot that the students want to go through and they have to stay eligible and all that stuff. But since I've been here, I've been diving into the numbers, trying to get more support services. And the truth is our numbers are really good. They're better than the general student population, but within our numbers, there are low areas that we could focus on. Our Latinx students, have a success rate in English of less than 25%. Our African-American students within our athletic departments have a success rate in math of less than like 18%. So there are things that we could dive into as a department even more to increase our overall numbers, but to focus on our diverse students as well, rather than saying, hey, athletics transfers 80% of our students, or athletics, has a GPA that's 3.3 over the general population that's 2.8 or something. So we could dive a little bit deeper, and I appreciate this conversation and the campus is doing, because it's going to allow us to raise everybody by focusing on our smaller groups within our athletic department. Hope that makes sense, but thank you guys very much.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. And something that might be a great resource for our EDI committee in CAD would maybe to get an annual report that breaks down our department, and so we could see like, hey, right now, hey, look, we've made improvements in this area, or our students of color are going the wrong direction in this aspect, so we could identify and be more productive as a committee in regards to the trainings and the resources that are needed for our faculty to make those connections and fill in those gaps. I think that would be huge if that could be something that could be shared with us. That I don't know if you have access just to do something real easy with that, with your AD info. But I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I could pull that. It kind of goes, I'm on the state committee for CalPass, which is kind of the equity thing for athletics. And so it pulls it, but it doesn't pull it like last year. It pulls it like 2 years ago. So it's a little bit late, but it still gives you some pretty accurate numbers.
Yeah, and I would bet if there's no major changes, those trends are the same as they were 2 years ago. Okay, thanks you guys, and appreciate you guys allowing us to go over on that agenda item, which means we need to do some shuffling right now. We do have a couple of items that were added to the agenda, and they're both supposed to be really quick. So, but we have one really big item, which is the KAD mission statement. And if it's okay with the department members, I'd like some feedback on, we've got 23 minutes left, and we have a couple of announcements that I think are important and we have some guests here that are a part of those announcements. So my vote would be if we can get through some quick announcements and then see what we can get into on the mission statement and the Black History Month notes from Monica. Is everybody okay with that, or does anybody have any other suggestions? So we had, and you guys, if you could be brief with your announcements. I know you said you'd be brief, but just to remind you what you said so we can get on to these other topics. But Crystal and Guy have been working on a committee with the sustainability committee and about the green athlete. And so Crystal, I'm going to turn it over to you. If you could maybe coach us up a little bit on that.
Yeah, I actually just messaged you, Lenny. We're going to wait. We have a PowerPoint to show you guys. So we're going to wait until next meeting
Okay.
So we have a little bit more time, so we don't rush through it because it is a longer process and there's a lot of not a ton of information, but more than just a 1-minute conversation about it. So it's kind of a long-term plan. So we'll talk about that next meeting, but just to kind of give you guys, Guy and I have been working on the sustainable student athlete and what that means for us at the JC on campus and in the community. So we have a lot of different things, but we have kind of a vision going forward. So we just wanted to take time to present that to you guys to kind of see and show you what our vision is and what we've been working on and kind of what our goals are for that green student athlete. That green bear cub is kind of what we're going for within our department, but also within the campus, but kind of focusing on what we can control as far as being a green student athlete on campus in our department at the JC. So more to come, but it's coming forward. So we're excited and I'm excited to be a part of it and trying to implement this as the student athletes come back, hopefully full time in the fall.
Thanks, Crystal, and apologies for not being able to have more time devoted to this meeting. I think that's an obvious addition to the student athlete orientation as well. And thank you. So thank you for bringing that up and the work you're doing on that. We look forward to having you guys report on that the next meeting. Coach McCray, you had a quick announcement.
Yeah, just real quick, CPR first aid for all of you. Matt's okayed us getting that. Those are you'll get an email from Rose pretty soon to get yourself involved in it. The only thing that'll happen, those of you that I think there's a lot of that are expiring this semester. So you'll just have to do some work on your own. It'll be a learning thing that you'll do a link to for a couple hours. Then when we can get back together in person, I'll have everybody get together and we'll check your skills off. So once you do that learning objective, your CPR will be good for a year to get the skills done.
Hey, Lenny, on top of that, thanks, Jim. On top of that, so you guys know, it's extremely important to make sure that we are up to date, everybody. It would be great to get some of your assistants there as well into this training. So you guys know Monica has secured funding to get 22 new AEDs. So there'll be AEDs that the coaches have to check out for practice, or when they go on the road, they check them out and take them. There'll be AEDs in every single facility, if not 2 in the bigger facilities. So we need to make sure that we, since we have this new resource coming, we need to make sure that we know how to use it, everybody. So thanks, Jim. That's really important.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for doing that.
Big time. And other quick announcements. I just completed proof 1 of the fall 21 schedule, which is just a draft, but I went through everybody's requests and their official asks and tried to accommodate all those changes. We are still in a cut mode, and we have not, well, we're still in cut mode. So we're trying to look at classes that in ways that we could improve our enrollment and be more efficient. So I will send out, once that gets to the scheduling office, then they make all the changes, and then we actually have a printable version of that. I will send it out to everybody before proof 2 is due. But so just so you know, though, if some of you asked for additional classes, that's going to be really hard to accommodate because we're in cut mode. So that is the overlying theme of the schedule, is efficiency, and we have to reduce some class sections. And that's really all I have to announce at this point from the chair's perspective. Matt, do you have anything you want to add from the dean's perspective that you haven't already talked about?
No, thanks.
Okay, and then do we have any AFA or academic senate announcements?
Just quickly for Senate, and Tara could jump in if I miss anything, but I mean, I send updates out with Cassandra as your Area 10 representatives. And if you guys ever have any questions, I encourage you to attend meetings, and you can always, Tara's on as an Area 8 rep as well. You could always reach out and ask us any questions, or if you're interested in getting involved, let us know. There's been a bunch of announcements out saying, hey, does anybody want to participate in these different work groups? There's a lot out there. So if you're curious, like, hey, I want to get involved, I missed the email or whatever, just let Tara and I know. And there's elections coming up again. I think I think I have to run due to logistics again for vice president. Secretary will be open again. Secretary Stover's running again, and then all the areas. We have one position that'll be open again that's up this semester. So keep an eye out. Those already went out. So just, it's cool if you missed it, just ask Tara, Cassandra, or I, we can help you.
Stanley, do we have anything new from AFA other than hopefully you saw the announcement that there's some transition time available?
Yes, get your applications in or your requests in. I think it's due March 31st. Was that the deadline? It just came out 2 days ago. So 35 hours, depending if you're contract, adjunct, allied. But anyway, get those hours in. The form takes like 3 seconds. So they've really, I don't know if you'll applied the last couple semesters, but it was quite chunky and now it's really easy. So that's awesome that you can get that compensation. But we had our second listening session on reopening process yesterday. It was well attended. You know, a lot of as expected, a lot of different needs and interests. You know, many faculty dying to get back on face-to-face, and I think the overall encouragement was, Lenny, I know you'll be the one, you and Matt, dealing with this, but they're hoping, it hasn't been negotiated yet, but they're hoping that the process for last spring, well, for this spring, that was, you know, that process where you would tell your chair, I would like to be face-to-face, will be the same. That's not confirmed yet, but when it is, they're encouraging everyone that wants to be face-to-face, you know, ask, get that in there if that's what you want. There are faculty that were feeling hesitant to do that, voiced yesterday in the listening session, and the encouragement was, you know, put that in there. And then allied faculty, I know, you know, our sports medicine, you guys are a little different because you have different standards, but the other allied faculty across the college were asking for more, I mean, they're different than an instructor where you're looking at the classroom and coming back, their situation is different, like the library. So they're doing a lot of work with the allied faculty. And our next listening session will be after spring break. There hasn't been a date picked, but we're hoping to have it not on a Thursday, since the last two were on Thursday, so we can get more voices for other folks. And that's it.
Thanks, Stanley. Last report, and then we're going to try to attack at least one more agenda item today. But our KAD staffing committee, just to give you an update, we did not receive any additional requested positions for this semester. So what that means is that basically the pool of positions that we had a year ago is still the same pool of positions. And so when it comes time to vote, all those positions will be sent out to you guys with some information about each of them, and you'll follow the instructions on the normal voting procedure. But just wanted to give an update on that because that's something we've been really trying harder this year to stay on track and on schedule. So no new positions, and you'll be getting more information on that soon. Okay, we have 2 items left, and I have a suggestion, but again, I would love to hear some other perspectives on this. We have 2 items left. One is a report out from Monica on the notes that she's taken from some of the Black History Month conversations that I think are super helpful. And then the other one is the discussion on our mission statement in KAD. And what I'd like to just take a second to speak about the mission statement and say that maybe this would be a good item to table to the next meeting, or until we get some of these trainings under our belts. I think we'll have different perspective to attack or to adjust or revise our mission statement once we are more knowledgeable. You know, regardless of where we all are on our scale of awareness and equity and diversity, I think me personally, I would like to go through some of these trainings, and because I think what's going to happen is we could spend time on this right now, and then we go through these trainings, and then we go, man, how did we miss that one? You know, or there might be some ones that it just might be helpful. So I'd like some feedback on that. If you guys are okay with that, then we could just spend the rest of the time. We have about 12 minutes talking about Monica's notes. And sorry, I have a helicopter right over my house. too loud. So you guys could I can't hear you, but you give me thumbs up if that's okay, or we good with that? Okay, then I'm gonna mute and turn it over to Monica. And Monica, for the last 11 minutes, if you could go through your Black History Month notes and kind of the next step to those, that'd be great.
All right. Oh, can I screen share that? Because just in case people, it makes more sense to view the list. So we went over this in our EDI. You might not be able to hear me, but can I share my screen? I think he's trying. So we went over this in the EDI committee, and then I wonder if Stanley and Tara want to, like, are we going to share out the committee's meeting, or like how will CAD know what the EDI committee kind of did? Or do you want to do that really quick before I start?
Yeah, I can do that really quick. Let me see if I can. Well,
I think it would just be like in the future, it would be one of our committee reports, like AFA or Academic Senate, and then there would also be the exercise for that meeting. So I'll shut up now. Go ahead, Tara.
Go ahead, Tara, because I could go fast.
Yeah, we're gonna utilize Microsoft Teams as a way to have a platform to sort of collaborate on this work. There's opportunity to have shared documents. We're also going to open a Canvas shell where we can each share assignments or resources within Canvas that you could then copy into your own course that we start to develop and use. We are building up trainings each time. So today we had Lauren. Next meeting we're having Dr. Smotherman. In May we're considering an EDI person that I am talking to from Santa Barbara City College they have a really extensive training program at their college for all their faculty. Let's see, we talked about reviewing our CAD website. So I think that can come later on, like you said, Lenny, after having some more training, more tools under our belt, looking at our mission statement, and then looking at our website. Like Dave McCall said, if I was a brand new student, I'm coming in and I go into the website, is it giving me sort of a step-by-step on what are the things I need to do and how do I get there, and what's the process like? I think there's a lot of websites, and other colleges are just so much more intuitive and easy to navigate. We also talked about adding in more support work around anti-Asian hate crime and transgender. We talked a lot about transgender participation in athletics, especially relevant in our world. Also, Be the Match program that if you've ever pursued the Be the Match, it's for leukemia. And what happens is, white people have, they get matches a lot more easily than people of color. So by doing a big drive on that and try to get more diverse people to sign up for that, then we're helping people that have leukemia that may not be able to get a match. And that's a life or death situation. So we talked about bringing that in, and then possibly having like a safe space ally training for our department. So just bringing in more trainings and for different areas. And that's it.
Whoops. I'll try not to repeat anything that Tara said, but so mainly this is from the Byron Reeves presentation. The other presentations were super powerful. If you guys don't know, 2 new Black part-time therapists in student psychological services, and I really encourage you guys to reach out. I'm trying to get them to come talk to us. I think they'd be a quick, excellent resources at our future student athlete orientation, but also to come talk. I just thought of this at a department meeting to introduce themselves. They're pretty busy, but I'm going to reach out to them again. And also, coaches, reach out to Randy Brown. I'm going to email you, but have Randy from SPS, please come talk to your teams. There's been recent suicides and attempted suicides in California community colleges because they're out, not doing their normal thing. So without the support, we normally engage them with their sport. So please reach out and have her talk to your teams about the resources available on campus. It could be quick. I know all fall sports, winter sports, spring sports, everybody, because they're all struggling and they think they got it and a lot of them don't. So please have Randy come talk to you. I forgot about that earlier. With this, the Black History Month presentation from Byron Reeves, it was essentially like called something like Beyond Solidarity Statements. And he was very honest in his experience, and other Black faculty and staff were very honest in their experiences and took a lot of risks in being very, in being vocal about their experiences and what really has to change. And one of the things we already talked about a little bit was the start was, look, we need to recognize as a college, as departments, as our individual coaching staffs, as individual instructors, that there's a problem. There is a problem. How much of a problem do you have, or how much work do you have to do, again, is different, but we need to recognize and acknowledge that these problems exist, right? With that, then they talked about a lot of solutions and action that we can take, right? Let's just not send out a solidarity statement and say, oh, I have a lot of diverse sports medicine students, so my work is done, right? It's like, what else can we do to really move the needle, right? So they talked about the 4 C's: be courageous, be committed, be collaborative, and be creative. And Chabot, were a couple representatives from Chabot to talk about their 10 by 10 program, specifically designed, it's amazing, to support their Black students. And it's a whole deal. And we could literally carbon copy that at San Jose JC if we so chose. And hopefully, like the committees like the ISSC are looking at doing that. One way we can help immediately was go to BSU events. Email Umoja right now, umoja@sanrosa.edu, and say, can I please get on the list for your events and upcoming info, right? And so at least you'll get those emails, and you'll feel hopefully, comfortable to be able to show up and then create relationships and then show support, but also learn from those experiences. So Delachey was saying a lot about just show up, support our BSU events, support our Umoja events. So that was one cool thing I thought would be easy for us to try to do. If we all attended one of those events once a year, it could really change the perspective of our department. There's also the Intercultural Center, engage with them. The Pride Center, Romagnoli I have a meeting with her next week, and we're going to see how we can, KAD EDI can partner with the Pride Center and figure out some of, how we can grow in the area of in terms of our LGBTQ plus populations, trans athletes, trans students, and different gender presentations, different gender identifications, and all of that, learning all those terms and things like that. Engaging in honest self-reflection. This was all the advice they were giving, like, here's what you guys can do now, right? Get ideas from students, and we talked about that a lot in the EDI committee. We gotta get perspective, because we don't know what we don't know, right? Let's ask the students, let's have them join our EDI committee meetings once in a while. Let's do surveys, all that. Create safe spaces. We talked about possibly creating, these safe spaces. We talked about at the orientation for student athletes specifically, we need their feedback on how kind of it's pretty white. It's pretty boring to them as young people. So we need their experience on both those fronts. Like, how do we become more inclusive? Also in the LGBTQ plus area, how do we become inclusive and accepting and make them feel comfortable, and also make it a little more 18 to 20-year-old centered, instead of us trying to act like we know what we're talking about.
I think the word was hip, Monica.
I accidentally said hip, and now when it flew out, I knew that this is that much more important. And then Lenny made it clear that anyway. Consider providing financial assistance, especially for Black students, but our underserved student populations. Believe it or not, all of our syllabi are probably racist. So we need to figure out, what does that mean to decolonize your syllabus? Because it's traditionally, there's tons of presentations. If you want to watch one, I can try to dig it up. But ASCCC, the Academic Senate of the state, did presentations on this, and it was mind-blowing. And I felt really bad about myself and where I was on the spectrum, because it's pretty bad. And some of it, like, using pronouns. I mean, I just like a week or two ago put she and her as my pronoun, because I figure, what do you mean? People looking at me, they know who I am. They know I'm a she or her. And that's just not the way we're supposed to look at it, right? It's supposed to make people feel comfortable. It's a whole different talk we could have. But support guided pathways, because guided pathways is equity work. So whatever we see guided pathway stuff, if we just support that and engage in that, that'd be great. Make sure our courses and the pictures we use in our curriculum is on the right track in terms of EDI. Really, really, really soft handoffs to support services. Our athletes and our students don't know. And like Dave McCall gave a perfect example of how you assume that they should be able to answer the email. but that's assuming maybe that some of our students have email or, have a computer at home to be able to access. If their cell phone broke and that's the only way that they have a way to access that email, then maybe they can't sign up for the counselor, right? So just engaging in soft handoffs, really helping some of those students get connected. Support services, embed them everywhere in your syllabus and your team meetings, everything. I know that football does a lot with that and really reaches out and has guest speakers, and I know some of the rest of you guys do as well. And yeah, creating a group for students of color as a safe space, considering creating these groups where and engaging them in Emoja and engaging them in the BSU and having BSU come and talk and say, come join us, Black student athletes at the orientation, right? Having the Pride Center speak at our orientations and at a department meeting or somebody to say, send your students to us, or student athletes, you're welcome here, right? That's what we could do right away. It's already embedded, right? So with that, Dave did a better job of me explaining how important the first year experience is, but I just thought all those were really good. I think we could probably send that out as an EDI committee in a better format too. And then always, I know the EDI committee wants your feedback in terms of what out of those ideas and good ideas that you guys have as well, where and how we could proceed. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Monica. Appreciate that. And the EDI committee is going to be sending resources out to you guys in addition to the things that we do as a department, so that hopefully you'll take some time. I think, if you, there's some irony to this whole thing, Dave, and it is our responsibility as white people to freaking educate ourselves, man. And but we need some help, buddy. And so, not that it's your responsibility to educate all of us on your experiences, but anytime that you feel comfortable lending a hand, your words speak volumes in this room of predominantly white people. And I thank you for being here today, and I thank you for speaking up, man. And I hope that you'll feel comfortable to do that even more often. And it would be great one day to see more color on this screen than what we see right now. So thank you, Dave. I appreciate you very much, man. And to all of you that showed courage today to talk about things that sometimes may be uncomfortable. It's self-reflection, and it's trying to be better. And so appreciate the conversation. I think it was super valuable for me, and hope it was for you. And so we'll get meeting notes out, and we'll get the recording link out, and we'll be ready for the next department meeting. So just reminders, you guys, the false proof one schedule will be coming out soon to you guys to see. Please look at it and let me know what other suggestions or requests that you might have. And we'll look forward to seeing everybody at our next department meeting. Any final comments from anybody else? Yeah, Dave.
Oh yeah, I just want to say thank you guys too. I'm pretty, pretty reserved and quiet, but this was a good meeting. And I just want to say, from my perspective, being, I was a student athlete, that, I'm available to speak and talk to those athletes, and I can break it down to say the Afro-American athlete and student anytime that you want, because I am, I left for Utah State and came to the JC. So I know a lot about the road to try to focus on the content of their character first, and then athletic, they're already good. They already got talent and skill, but to give them life skills is where it's hard. So, you had a super athlete, and then you say, wow, but he can't get his life skills together. He don't even know how to wash clothes probably, or pay a bill, or, so to explain that to the athlete, especially to the Afro-American athletes, I'm open to help in that way as well. I'm open to help all students because we're all educators. But just when we talk specifically we're trying to set a vision for them to understand, to give them some directions and guidance, I'm open to help out any way I can. Thanks.
Well, we will definitely be calling you for come talk to our football guys at some point. I appreciate that. Any other comments, anybody? Or if you have requests for agenda items or potential guests that you think would be valuable to our department for this topic or any topics that involve our department, please get those to me. And I don't see anybody raising their hand, so I'll say thanks you guys, and have a wonderful weekend. Thanks you again for all your participation.